Welcome. I'm Kent Malinowski, joined by Steve Clark. Hello, Steve.
Hey, Kate. Good to talk with you. I'm looking forward to this. This should be fun.
I think it will be. I remember a news conference when Dr. Anthony Fauci this week was asked the question, when will things be back to normal? And his answer was prophetic. He said, probably never. I believe he's right. We have to plan for the next normal.
Yeah, it'll be different. It won't be the same. Normal is dead. It'll still be good, but it'll just be different.
I agree. So what I'd like to talk about today, and I'd certainly love to hear your insight on this, is what in the world do we do as salespeople given the conditions on the ground now? I'd like to share an interesting quote from a really smart guy by the name of Ian Davis. He's the managing partner at McKinsey and Company. And he said this probably, well, it's probably the most prophetic 5 sentences I've heard. And I'll share it with you. It's for some reason, or for some organizations, near-term survival is the only agenda item. Others are peering through the fog of uncertainty, thinking about how to position themselves once the crisis has passed and things return to normal. The question is, what will normal look like? While no one can say how long the crisis will last, what we find on the other side will not look like the normal of recent years. Now, the prophetic part of that is he wrote that 11 years ago during the global financial crisis. I think we've been here before, different scenario, different situation, but what we have to do, Steve, I think, is most sales professionals today who are working cannot claim that they sold, much less thrived in a down market. I believe the next normal is going to be different from the pre-COVID normal. Things are going to change. What's going to change and how should you adapt? And that's what today's broadcast is all about.
Yeah, let me kind of pivot on that a second. I mean, go back and I got a lot of gray hair here, and for perspective, I started my sales career in the Jimmy Carter recession. My home loan was 13%, double-digit unemployment, double-digit inflation, and fast forward from there, we had the 91, 92 dip. Then we had the dot-com bust in 2000, 2001. And then we had the Great Recession in 2008. So you're absolutely right. We've been here before. It's predictable. And really what is interesting is that we have learned from that. Those that are paying attention and are keeping up with what's going on realize that the precipitating factor of the COVID-19 makes the situation a little bit different. However, the reaction that people have in the marketplace, the behavioral scientists will tell us that behavioral psych is behavioral psych, and you can predict how people are going to respond in any given crisis when they're threatened. So to your point, we've been here before. We really do know what we should be doing going forward, although we don't know exactly what the landscape's going to look like. But from a human psychology standpoint, we certainly know what we need to be doing.
A lot of the prospects and the customers that our audience is dealing with, many of them these people are floating in an ocean of emotion in this moment. And I believe when you try to market and try to sell something to people in a high emotional state, you can either win big or lose big. And you're going to lose big if you violate the rules of social conduct. What do you think?
I think so. I think that there are appropriate things to be doing, and there are things not to be doing that come across as self-centered and just really aren't cool from a behavioral standpoint.
This is a slide that was shared yesterday on a team conference call from an HR team from one of my clients. And the reality is this slide. People are not working from home. You are at home during a crisis trying to work. So I believe if you operate in a zone of behavior as a professional salesperson, which appears as predatory, insensitive, or devoid of empathy, you're going to violate and destroy forever those bonds of trust. So what I'd like to do is talk about trust.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's that really is the big issue right now. So I think you and I talked about this the other day about what is trust, and I really think you have a great definition for what trust is.
I'll share my formula for trust, and my formula is pretty simple. Trust equals intent plus your expertise. So the question I would encourage each of you in the audience to think about: what is your sales intent? What is your sales mission? Is your intent to sell somebody something? Is your intent to win a deal? Are your intentions centered on yourself and your needs, being I-centered, or is your intent to help your prospects?
I think that's a great point, and I think that before we get into some of these things about what we can do to address this issue, I think it's important to realize that we live in the most untrusting society that mankind has ever known. The reality is our religious leaders have let us down. Our political leaders have let us down. Our business leaders have let us down. Our educational leaders have let us down. And really, no one trusts anyone, especially salespeople. And prospects or buyers do not trust anything a company has to say, nor anything a salesperson has to say. So, as a seller, if you don't understand that you have two strikes against you going in, you are grossly underestimating the difficulty of establishing trust. And we know this: people are not going to give you money or me money or anyone else money until they trust that individual. So it's again, we don't want to gloss over that. It is a huge issue. In fact, if we don't overcome that one, nothing else is going to take place.
You're so right. And think about this concept of trust. It takes so long for people to trust you as a salesperson, but it's so the paradox and the irony is that you can lose that trust in an instant. And you can lose that trust in your first contact, your first reach out, your first connection, your first engagement with a prospect. You can clearly destroy that bond of trust and destroy it forever.
Yeah, and it can be one false move. I mean, the difference between making a sale and losing a sale can be measured in millimeters. It's not, feet or yards. One false move, one unwise comment, anything like that can really undo everything you've done to try and gain someone's trust and get them to accept what it is that you're trying to propose to them.
So let's give the folks some ideas and some concepts on how to create this environment of trust. And let's focus first on intent, and then we'll layer in expertise.
Sure.
When I say intent, is what is your intent relative to that prospect? And I think it's a great opportunity now for the audience to look inwardly, to reflect in their own heart on what is the mission that you have as it relates to the prospects that you're dealing with. I think prospects are in a mode now more than ever. Don't sell me, help me. Listen with empathy. Read your prospects for the clues that they're ready to talk business. Some of the prospects that you're talking to today are in buying mode. Some of them are in survival mode. What are they focused on? Are they focused on saving lives, or are they focused on saving livelihoods? Are they paralyzed? Is their world frozen in place? Are they worried about their health or the health of a family member? Are they worried about having their job when they come out?
When I'm talking with salespeople, I quite often ask them if selling is something they do for people or is it something they do to people.
I love that.
And that always gets people to take pause. But I think that's exactly what you're talking about.
Your sales and marketing behaviors will define you in this moment of crisis. So my suggestion is we shift from selling mode to help and nurture mode. So from selling to helping, and I'll tell you an example of a question that's an unfair question when you're prospecting right now. The question is, how can I help you? If you're asking that question, it's an unfair question because it doesn't have any context, especially early on in a relationship, because people don't know what you do. They don't know how you can help them. So I was on a sales call yesterday, and I asked the woman I was speaking with, I said, when I first started, I said, look, it's been weeks since we established this appointment via email. And in the period of time between when we established the meeting and the time we're on this phone call now, both of our worlds have changed. So I said, I'm going to ask you an unfair question. And the unfair question is, how may I be of service to you? But I'm not going to ask that question until the end of our phone call, because at this moment, you don't have the context for what I do and how I can help. So can we have a conversation about what you're going through, what your people are going through? Let me see your world through my eyes. Then I'll be in a position, and you'll be in a position to understand how I might be of service to you. And that's how I framed the call before we began.
I like that. So I think that another thing to do, and this sort of goes into how to go about the trust. I think it's perfectly okay to be transparent and authentic with folks, and be somewhat as if that you aren't a genius and have all the answers and so forth, but to really be a human being and say to the person, you know what? I'm going through some issues right now too. My world has changed. I'm kind of trying to figure out how to go about doing this as well, and not coming across as someone who's here to pick your pocket, but someone who is here to, like you say, be of service to you. So I kind of need you to help me a little bit so that I can have some sense of what your world looks like. So I think that's just another example, another way of saying it. And everybody has to come with their own words about that. And I don't think this is a script that you put out there, but I think it's something that comes from your heart. And if it's not in your heart, then it's going to be awfully hard to say anything like that, because it's going to come across as transactional rather than relationship. But people know when you're BSing them, and they know when you're not authentic. And probably one of the best things we can do is let's just be real with people and acknowledge the fact that, we're all struggling and we're all living in an uncertain environment. And I think doing that will disarm people and get a conversation that's a real conversation, instead of this dancing around like buyers and sellers, typically have done.
I love that. And it's being truly authentic and truly transparent is one of the keys to intent. Because if you're coming across as promoting or selling or trying to get someone to do something that's not in their best interest, you'll violate that formula of trust. I believe the key is, if you're operating from the place of where you're putting their needs, your prospect or your customer's needs above your own, that helps you bridge that level of trust, with the first step being intent.
Yep, for sure.
I believe, Steve, that, and I'd like to talk about what's going to change and what do we as salespeople have control over in this environment today, where the global economy has been put into a coma by our governments. Well, maybe a better metaphor is think of a herd of racehorses, right? It's been hooded, and the economy is like a herd of racehorses. It's been hooded and hobbled and confined into a corral. Now, we know the gate's going to open. We don't know when, and we don't know if the horses are going to leave the gate at a gallop or at a creep. So what we can do is we can plan for and control the three things that I believe we will have the ability to control when we leave, when we operate from this condition of unknown. And I'd like to talk about the three things that, as professional salespeople, we've got the ability to control. And I know you and I are the same mind on this. So let me share you my opinion, and I'd like to hear your feedback.
Okay, great.
You clearly have control over your prospecting cadence. I call this the 3 C's: cadence, content, and confidence. Cadence is how often you reach out to prospects and connect with them. The second is the content, what you say, your messaging, your story, the storytelling approach that defines how you help other people. I think the third thing is how you feel about your situation. That we have the ability to control. And I'd like to hear your feedback on that.
Well, I think those are all three important things. And what I have been doing for the last 3 weeks is my cadence has ramped up considerably. I have made more phone calls. I've reached out to more people. Obviously, we can't go see people physically, but I have done more of that sort of thing than I have done in a long time. And I have done that with both prospects and clients, just reaching out and asking people, how are you? What's going on? That type of thing. And interestingly enough, that has gotten me a lot of really good conversations with people, which will result in new clients somewhere down the road, next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, whenever. So I've certainly done that. And then the content, what I have done content wise is I have given people a lot of information. I have done free webinars. I've done free coaching sessions. I've given away video training that I have. I have been giving away my book for a long time to folks. So I've done all of those kinds of things. I've just done them a lot more here in the last 3 weeks. And
mental conditioning is so important. And you said something the other day on one of your broadcasts that I'd like to hear you talk about again. That's the 20-60-20 rule.
Well, in terms of you're talking about in terms of sales professionals, or about just
those that are going to thrive coming out of or during this crisis, the 20% that are going to thrive. What are they thinking differently? What's their mindset?
Well, let's talk about the 20-60-20. This is what's going to happen with businesses. It doesn't matter what industry you talk about. This is how it's going to shake out, because it's all calculus. It's all math, and it works all the time in good economies, bad economies. It doesn't make any difference. 20% of the people that are currently in business, 20% of the businesses that currently exist will no longer exist when we come out of this thing. They just won't be in business anymore. 60% of the businesses will continue to try and do what they have always done without changing anything fundamentally. And they will try to use old technology, old belief systems, old methodologies, and those folks will try to make that work in a new environment. For the most part, it won't work, but it will work well enough that some of them will survive, but there will be a percentage of that 60% that go by the wayside too. And then there will be 20% who boldly look to change fundamentally what they're doing, the way they're marketing, the way they're selling, their approaches, and so forth. And that 20% will dominate the marketplace. And in reality, that 20% will garner 80% of the business going forward. And it's the old 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. For folks who have heard that before, if you haven't heard it, you should study that. And actually, Kent, what I think is going to happen, particularly because of the internet, I think that 20%, there will be 20% of that top 20% that get about half of the business that's out there. So here's what that means. 4% of the businesses in any product category are going to get about 50% of the business. Here's a perfect example. Amazon. Amazon gets more than 50% of the online business. And you can look at every industry and see that. And folks have a decision to make. They will be in one of those three groups because there are no other groups. That's it. You're going to be one of those three. So you have the opportunity now to decide which group you're going to be in. And ultimately, if you're not in that top 20%, you really are going to have a rough life.
So you're so spot on. And I know what's going to change. We don't know how it's going to change, but we know that decision makers, that in your customers and your prospective customers' businesses, they're going to be managing their businesses remotely for months. Their buying processes will be reinvented. This will change the way you communicate with your customer base or your prospect base. I believe the era of in-person sales presentations is over. So the implications are profound. I mean, I heard a statistic yesterday that college students now who are working and learning remotely are reporting that their professors are struggling now because they haven't learned the skill of how to teach their classes remotely. So as salespeople, you've got to learn the art and science of communicating remotely. I know you've been using Zoom for a long time. Salespeople are got to get up to speed. This is going to be chess, not checkers. That means your playbook has got to evolve in creating these. What are these scenarios? What are these scenarios going to look like that are different? And you've got to be ready. You've got to be prepared for those things.
And I think the point there are many folks that are baby boomers. You and I fit into that category, but there are many baby boomers that have been dragged into the technology digital world now, that were reluctant to embrace technology before now. They have no choice now if they're going to survive. That's one of the skills they're going to have to acquire, is how to use technology. The fact that 46 billion downloads of the Zoom app happened 2 weeks ago tells you everything you need to know about that. Zoom's been around for quite a while. I've been using it nearly 3 years. So this is not anything new. It's just that folks all of a sudden, because of this great upheaval, this external event that occurred, forced them into doing things they didn't want to do, even though they might have known it was something they should embrace. And the reality is, people never leave their comfort zone voluntarily. What's happened now is their comfort zone has been shattered, and they cannot go back to their comfort zone. There is no comfort zone to go back to because it no longer exists. And those who don't understand that and embrace that and are wringing their hands and whining about, well, I don't want to do that, or it's unfair, or it's not, why did that happen? Folks that are living that kind of life and thinking like that, they're not going to come out of this thing at all.
So I think the messages we're sharing, if I could summarize them, really a few key points. Figure out how to be of service, even if that means taking the sales hat off and putting on the hat of compassion. That, in using that message as a way to connect with prospects and customers. You asked the other day, what is it we're doing? We've changed our value proposition. We're offering to the business owners that we coach free wargaming scenarios for CEOs and owners. What's the new normal going to look like? And let's prepare your team to emerge and be ready to meet the market with these new changing conditions. we're giving free access to our virtual coaching sessions that we'll do online, and of course, access to the next normal sales playbook, which we're writing, very similar to what you're doing. Even if you can't, there's an expression at the minimum, ramp up your selling behavior. And even if you can't get into the forest, then spend time sharpening the saw. You've got to find a way to get to work. You can't sit on the sidelines and wait for this thing to get better. Wait for the dust to settle. That's a recipe for failure.